My name is Kara Woods. I'm a fourth-year PhD student here at Tuskegee University in the Integrative Public Policy and Development program. Again, welcome and thank you for being here. I just have a couple of announcements. First of all, thank you, Doug Jones, for coming for this town hall at the prestigious Tuskegee University. A little recognition to go to our elected officials. We have Probate Judge James Cooper, our Mayor Tony Haygood, and then our commissioners Miles Robinson and Drew Thompson, and then we have a representative, Ms. Walker. So thank you all who are here. Warren, I'm so sorry.
But
Warren.
that is my maiden name. I like that.
I'm so sorry. And also, welcome to everyone who's watching at home because this is being live streamed. And so right now we're going to start off our town hall with a welcome from Malik Fowler. I'm going to get it together. And then we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance by Courtney Johnson, and then the introduction of the senator by Zachary Thornton.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Malik Fowler, a senior political science major from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm currently serving as the vice president for the Student Government Association. And I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to today's campus town hall meeting. On behalf of the Student Government Association and the students, I would also like to welcome Senator Doug Jones to Tuskegee University, as well as thank him for coming out to speak to our students and for answering the questions and concerns that the people might have in the community and on campus. So thank you.
Can everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I have a flag up there.
Yeah, we don't have a flag in here, but we'll improvise. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One more thing, I would like to thank our president, Dr. Lil McNair, for being here. Also, for the question and answer afterwards, you were going to have a ticket. I'm going to pull the number of the ticket, and then if you have that question, we'll have the senator answer your question. So thank you once again.
Greetings, everyone. I am Zachary Thornton, a second-year political science major from the City of Dreams, Montgomery, Alabama. On this fine afternoon, I have the honor to introduce an influential leader in the political system, Senator Doug Jones. Senator Jones has spent his life working to make Alabama a better place. Born in Fairfield in 1954 to a U.S. steelworker and a stay-at-home mom, he grew up in Alabama during a period of great change and played a critical role in helping the state and her people overcome some of their darkest days. He first developed a love for politics, organizing through his volunteer work with campus affairs at the University of Alabama and in a statewide campaign to modernize Alabama's court system. After graduating from the Cumberland School of Law at Samford University, he worked as staff counsel to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee for Senator Howell Heflin, and later returned home to serve as a Assistant United States Attorney. President Clinton later nominated him to become United States Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, where he served until June of 2001. It was while holding that position that Senator Jones successfully prosecuted 2 of the 4 men responsible for the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street of Baptist Church. Finally bringing full justice and closure nearly 40 years after the attack that killed 4 young girls, along with taking on the Ku Klux Klan, he indicted domestic terrorist Eric Rudolph and persecuted other criminals who sought to use fear, hatred, and violence to inhibit the rights of others. Since his election to the Senate in December 2017, Senator Jones has brought that lifetime passion for justice and commitment to service to his role in the United States Senate. As senator, he has fought to increase access to affordable health care for every Alabamian, including expanding Medicaid in Alabama, and to make sure that every child in every zip code had access to high-quality education. He has worked across the aisles to pass legislation, to help our farmers, to shed light on the civil rights code cases, and to expand access to broadband in our rural communities. For his efforts, he was named as one of the most bipartisan members of the U.S. Senate. He has earned a National Rural Health Champion Award and was honored by the League of Southeastern Credit Union as its federal lawmaker of the year of 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Senator Doug Jones.
Thank you. Thank you, Zach. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Zach. I appreciate everybody coming out. It's great to be here with you. It's always great to be back in Tuskegee. I just love this campus and this gorgeous setting. Wonderful to have all of our elected officials, commissioners, the mayor, our great state representative, and of course, Dr. McNair, who I was fortunate enough to come for her investiture a while back. But it's also good to see some old friends. Joe Turnham. Joe was state party chairman when I was sworn in as U.S. Attorney and spoke at my investiture. And Willie Kirk. Willie Kirk has been around since Moses was in the bulrushes. And one of my favorite people, and his donkey Irene used to travel around with everybody at all the Democratic Party events, and I think was even in the Clinton inaugural parade, if I remember correctly. That's exact twice. So it's great to be here. I really appreciate it. There's, it's good to be back home a little bit. We were on a 2-week recess. When I was growing up, recess was called play period, but we don't get play periods. We have a working recess, and I've been traveling around the state in different places trying to talk to, doing things like this, having as many people as I can that I talk to, because, part of my job is not only to vote and do things in Washington, but it's also to listen, because, I work for you, and that's the way I approach this job, and so I'll listen to the things going on, I'll listen to try to get people's concerns, and there's a lot of concerns that folks have these days, whether it's health care, whether it's education, or whether it's things going on in Washington, D.C. right now with House investigations. And we'll talk just a little bit about that. So as we've talked about, and I want to thank Tuskegee University, Dr. McNair, and our great students here for inviting us to be here and welcoming us to this wonderful auditorium and this wonderful facility. So I'm going to talk a few minutes. But like I said, I really want to kind of hear from folks here. You've got questions, you've got comments. We'll do this, and we normally have to do it kind of by lottery because I've got limited time. And I also don't like to play favorites with everybody wanting to raise their hands, and I'm like the teacher, and I don't want to play a favorite here. So we'll do this. If you got a little red ticket or whatever the color is, that's what we'll use to call out numbers. So let's talk a little bit about some things that I wanted to focus on, that I've been focusing on since I was sworn in January of 2018. It's been a really exciting time. It has just been an amazing time. My election was December of 2017, and 3 weeks later I'm getting sworn in the United States Senate, and it's been a remarkable run. We put together a great staff. We've got a state staff because I've got offices in Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, Mobile. We've now got a satellite office in Selma. We've got an office in Dothan that people can use. No one's there full time. And then I've got a whole range of staff folks in Washington, D.C. Our office is in the Hart Senate office building, on the 3rd floor, so invite everybody to come visit when you can. I am on several committees. I'm on 3 major committees in Washington and in the Senate, and a 4th that doesn't do legislation. The Aging Committee does a lot of work. We have hearings about different things that affects the elderly population, but we don't do legislation. The legislative committees that I'm on is the Banking Committee. It's banking and housing. We've done a lot of work in the banking space over my first year and a half in the Senate. We've got some things involving new money laundering statutes that I'm working on. But we're also beginning to look more and more about housing. Housing is still a big issue in this state. It's a big issue in the country. Affordable housing. And in addition, what they call the government-backed organizations like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have been in a receivership. And they're the ones that really are the backbone of what the 30-year mortgage. And for those of you who own homes, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't yet, you're going to need them. And we've got to make sure that we have both affordable housing and an affordable mortgage system here where people can get into home ownership. So we're doing a lot in that area this year with regard to the banking committee. I'm also on the HELP committee, H-E-L-P, which is Health, Education, Labor, Pensions. We've done a lot mainly on health because I have really focused on health care as part of my tenure in Washington, D.C. We're losing rural hospitals in Alabama. We're trying to do things we've had some success with Medicare to try to change some reimbursements. But as was mentioned here earlier, we're talking about expanding Medicaid. As a U.S. Senator, I can't vote to expand Medicaid. That's strictly the governor and the legislature. And I know our great representative here has been pushing that along with some others, but we can't seem to get enough people on the other side of the aisle to expand Medicaid. If we were to expand Medicaid in this state today, over 300,000 people that do not have health insurance would have health insurance for the first time. We would get a couple of $1 billion a year. That's $1 billion with a B coming in. That's our money. I mean, it's our money that's going out to these other states that have expanded Medicaid. It would come back to Alabama, which would help prop up the hospitals and the healthcare systems, as well as help drive the economy of Alabama. You know, we invest so much, and rightly so. We invest in so many industries that we ask to come into Alabama and to set up shop. Our automotive industry is a great example of that. But Alabama just doesn't seem to want to invest in the health of its population as much as other states. We need to be investing in healthcare in Alabama just like we invest in other businesses, because healthcare is a business and it helps the local economy, it helps rural areas, but more importantly, it's just the right thing to do for the people of this state who quite frankly, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, we're a fairly unhealthy state in Alabama. We have a lot of issues, a lot of people with pre-existing conditions that we need to help, and the Affordable Care Act is under attack these days. So we've been working on that, but it's also part of education. Education is a big part of what we're doing. We do the oversight for the Department of Education. There's been a lot of things that have gone on lately, but what we're really focusing on now is higher education a little bit. We're trying to reauthorize the Higher Education Act. But we're also got some other things. Senator Alexander introduced a bill the other day that I think is going to help. Hopefully we'll get some traction on. I have been one of the leading voices in the U.S. Senate since I got there for funding for HBCUs. Tuskegee, A&M, Alabama State. We've got 14 HBCUs in Alabama, more than any state in the country. And last year, when my first year in the Senate, I was able, along with Senator Harris, Kamala Harris, we were able to secure a 14% funding increase in HBCUs. It's the first funding increase that HBCUs had seen in 5 or 6 years. Thank you. But now we're facing another cliff because the funding for HBCUs has expired at the end of September, which is was the end of the old fiscal year. So as of October 1st, that funding has gone away. Now, fortunately, the funding for this calendar year, this school year, academic year, has been in place. But we've got to get some either permanent funding or extend that funding. And I've got a couple of bills pending that would do that. One would do for a couple of years. The other, we would try to do some more permanent funding. The House of Representatives actually passed a bill to extend funding for HBCUs before we went out of session. I passed it unanimously, but for some reason I couldn't get my bill on the Senate floor. Senator Alexander objected to it, and he was roundly criticized from various quarters. But at the same time, he's got a bigger picture in mind. He's got a bigger plan in mind, and it's usually worked out well for him. And so the same day that I asked unanimous consent to consider my bill for HBCUs, he objected, but he also filed a bill of which I'm a part of, which will do several things, and it's a number of things that are important to you. Number one, it will give permanent funding for HBCUs, which is important. We won't have to go through this fiscal cliff ever so often. It would give permanent funding at a certain level, and then we can always increase it. The second thing it would do is a bill that he and I have been working on for 1.5 years to try to help students in Alabama with their financial aid. How many here has had to fill out or even tried to fill out the FAFSA form? Yeah. How many of you found it such a pain that, well, I won't ask you if you just abandoned it, but how many people have found it one of the most difficult things they've ever done in their life? Raise your hands, I know it is. So we're trying to simplify that for you. We've got half the kids in Alabama right now, just under half the kids in Alabama right now walk away from financial aid because the FAFSA form is too complicated. We have them walking away because they'll fill it out and it just is not just right, and they'll audit it and ask for a bunch of information and they can't provide it. And so Senator Alexander and I have been working on a plan. He's part of this bill that's been introduced that would simplify the FAFSA to about 25 questions. And it would allow federal agencies like the IRS and others to share information so that that can be automatically populated. It will help Alabama students so much because there's so much money that we're leaving on the table. Not just in student loans, because student loans is another whole issue, but in grants, Pell Grants, any number of things that are out there for so many students, and they're just not being able to get those. This bill is going to also, I think, expand Pell Grants. We're looking to expand Pell Grants beyond what they are now because so many kids need those and depend on those, not just to get a four-year college education, but to get a two-year college degree, to get things that can help them prepare for the workforce. So we're looking at that. Last year we passed the Perkins Career Technical Grant Program that is helping folks. It's a big thing in Alabama to try to help folks prepare for the jobs that are not necessarily the academic jobs, but the jobs that are going to build the middle class and that are so important to all the businesses coming in. So that's kind of what's going on in that committee. And the third committee I'm on is Armed Services. Important for the state of Alabama. We have so much. I will tell you guys, I wish everybody could see what I see about how Alabama contributes to the security of the United States. It is truly stunning. It really is stunning. And we've got such a great history right here in Tuskegee with the Red Tails and the Tuskegee Airmen. We've built on that, and now you've got Redstone Arsenal up in Huntsville. You've got the Anniston Army Depot. You've got Maxwell Air Force Base. You've got Gunner, and you've got Fort Rucker, and then Austell is building Navy ships down in Mobile. We've got helicopter plants in Alabama. It is remarkable. I mean, I think Alabama gets, the latest figure I saw was like we're number 9 of the 50 states in terms of federal defense dollars coming here. NASA is a big presence in Alabama as well. So my seat on the Armed Services Committee has let us look at a lot of issues for national security, which and we've got to spend some money on national security. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran are all coming on up, and we've got to make sure that we're prepared. It's also given me an interesting perspective on veterans issues because we've really been pushing on veterans issues. You couple that with the areas in with rural health care. Those are the things that I've been trying to focus on. We were just having a discussion. I know you had a tragedy here this week, and you lost one of your students. And I don't know all the circumstances, but I know this. There was not a local emergency room for that student to be taken to. And we need to try to look at ways to try to make sure that we get ER services and urgent care services in every area. And that's something we want to look at. It's not an easy fix. The state, I think, has not done all that they could do, but I think they're trying to do more. It's not an easy fix from our standpoint, but we're going to be looking at that. We've talked about some ideas, and we're going to go back out and looking at that. So finally, let me mention the one thing that's really on the topic of at least all the social media and the national media these days, and that's the inquiry going on in the House of Representatives. And I'm not going to dwell a lot on that, but what I can do is it's been really frustrating. I mean, the first week all this stuff really started hitting, things moved so fast that my head was just spinning. And I didn't sleep a lot because people started going to partisan corners. People started really getting on either the right or the left and yelling at each other about this. And they're still doing it. The Republican Party today had a press conference criticizing me because I'm not taking a stand. Well, folks, I got to tell you something. We're a ways to go in this. What the American people deserve, what we as members of Congress deserve for our constituents, and what each of you deserve are the facts. The facts. This is not a partisan witch hunt. This is not a hoax. There's some very serious allegations out there right now, some of which have been corroborated by the transcript of a phone call between the President and the President of Ukraine, some of which have been corroborated, we've seen now, by text messages. So we've got to make sure that we're going on a process that's fair and that people have confidence in. It is not a question of what should ultimately happen yet. The only thing that we can say that should happen is that we need to know the facts. You deserve that. And if I'm ever called on to cast a vote one way or another, I deserve to have those facts so that I can make a fully informed decision on whether or not the president has put our national security at risk, whether or not he has abused his office for his personal political campaigns. And there's a lot out there. But I will tell folks, and I've mentioned this several times, you heard in the introduction, I'm an old prosecutor. I've had 2 different stints as a prosecutor, but I've also defended a lot of cases. And what I've seen is as disturbing, and in some cases, many would say damning, as the transcript of the phone call was and these text messages. I've seen a lot of times where evidence looks really, really bad, but when you get the whole picture and the whole puzzle, it just doesn't turn out to be quite as bad. The flip side of that is I've also seen pieces of a puzzle that people thought were unimportant to the big picture. And lo and behold, they connected all the dots. So we really don't know just yet. I hope this will move forward. But for anybody to simply say that this should stop immediately in a partisan way, or if anybody says we need to go ahead and vote now, either one of those is wrong. This is not a socialist agenda. It's not a liberal agenda. It's not a democratic agenda. It is an American agenda. It is a constitutional agenda that we have to go forward. I hate we're in this position, but we are in this position, and we're going to have to see this thing through. So that's kind of where I am on that. You may have some other questions. I don't know if you'll get much out of me because I'm getting the facts just like everyone else is. And remember the way this process goes. If there is, after this inquiry, the House may or may not take a vote. If they take a vote, they will either vote on articles of impeachment and they will send those articles to the Senate, or they will vote them down and it will die. If articles of impeachment come to the Senate of the United States, impeachment doesn't mean that the president is removed. It just means that articles come over for the Senate, and there will be a trial in the United States Senate where the Chief Justice presides. And I, as one of 100 senators, I act as a juror and ultimately will have to decide up or down whether the president is guilty of what he's been charged with. So it's a daunting responsibility. I take it very, very seriously. And we'll see how this goes. But I take my oath very seriously to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States. And if it gets down to it, I'll weigh the evidence in front of me, and I'll make the decision that I think is the right. The same way, if you ever get called to jury duty, the first thing, if you get called to sit in on a trial, the first thing that judge is going to tell you, and the lawyers are going to tell you, you haven't heard any of the evidence yet. You're hearing opening statements. You haven't heard anything. Don't deliberate. Don't deliberate until you get all the evidence in. And that's what we're going to do. And so that's kind of where we stand. So thank you all again for being here. I'm looking forward to spending a few minutes with you. And with that, let's go ahead and we can maybe kind of pull out a couple of numbers and feel free. We've got a couple of microphones in different places, but we'll call it out and hopefully get some questions and some dialogue going. And it's open to anything. You guys, whatever's on your mind, we'll try to talk about it.
So I will pull random tickets, and then I'll do the last 3.
Oh, wait a minute. I told Dr. McNair she could get the first question if she wanted it, so that's a privilege. Do you want to ask a question, Dr. McNair, or you?
I would. I'd just like to follow up on your remarks about the futures fund for HBCU.
Yep.
And what do you think the future holds in terms of moving that?
I think it will happen. It's just a question of time. The question was whether or not the Futures Act for HBCU funding and what the prospects are. I think it will happen. It's just a question of timing. We're going to keep pushing it because you've got a plan. You've got a plan for next year and the next. And so the planning is really important, and I get that. Unfortunately, some of the other events going on in Washington may get in the way of any legislation, and that's what I worry about. But we do have appropriations coming up. We do have some other things that we've got to do to just fund the government. So I'm hopeful that we can do something by the end of the year. If not by the end of the year, certainly in plenty of time for you to plan for next year. Funding for HBCUs is a really bipartisan effort right now. Like I say, the House passed it unanimously. And to get the House of Representatives these days to do anything unanimously, you know you got a lot of support. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to get a ticket. I'm going to the last 3 numbers, and then if you have a question, you'll just come up to one of the mics on either side and ask your question. So the last 3 are 043. 043. So if you have a question.
He's got it right there.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Judge, Senator.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask 1, 2 questions while I'm at the back?
1, 2 questions. You got 2 numbers? No, you go ahead. You got the mic right now.
My first question is, you know, in my lifetime, I noticed how laws and sentences has changed depending on who's being sentenced and who the law is being applied to. We now have the opioid epidemic going on that's been termed a mental health issue. We have brothers in jail for life because of heroin, which was an opioid.
Right.
And we were defined as thugs, et cetera, et cetera. I would like to see some attention paid to setting aside some of those life sentences in light of where we are as it relates to the humanity of the opioid and drugs. My second question is, and President McNair got part 1 or part of it, but the other one, what's the current status of the MSI legislation, proposed legislation?
The MSI.
The Minority Serving Institutions.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about with President McNair. That's right now kind of pending in the Senate because it's HBCUs and minority serving institutions. I think that'll get passed hopefully by the end of the year. It's going to be, Senator Alexander got it as part of a bigger package. And we're hoping it'll get, the funding right now is not, we've had funding for this coming year, so everything is stable right now, but we got a plan for the future. So I'm hoping that we'll get that as part of a bigger package, either through appropriations this fall or the standalone bill that Senator Alexander's got.
And your Futures Act.
Futures Act's part of that.
Part of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to, lastly, just express my thanks for your support of HBCUs and creating increases that will lead to equity among higher institution funding. We appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you. We're doing some other things too, even with ROTC units. We've got some funding in our in the NDAA to try to help ROTC buildings and the infrastructure for ROTC units at HBCU. To get back to your first question, though, about the opioids and the heroin, I think folks are looking at that. Remember now, there's a lot of the folks, and criminal justice has been an area, criminal justice reform has been an area that I've been working on for years. And we passed the First Step Act this year in December, which is a good step, but it's just a first step. A lot of the heroin life sentences are from people who were selling large quantities. It's not the users. We're focusing a lot on the opioid and heroin user epidemic that we've got now because it's a huge problem. But I put a difference between that user who's got an addiction versus someone who is helping inject that addiction in those people. So a lot of the life sentences for heroin, cocaine, and others are big time distributors. And that's a little bit different. We are doing some things on marijuana convictions and other things like that to make sure folks have an opportunity to get out. The First Step Act was a way to do that, but there's a number of other bills pending that I think are going to help. And the opioid crisis is something that we're looking at from top to bottom. We're trying to change the culture of big pharma. We're also trying to get folks on a local level to see, because it is it is a mental health issue, but it's also a law enforcement issue. It's a public health issue as well, and those are the things that we've got to look at. And I think we're making some strides, but we've still got a long way to go on that. But criminal justice is always a part of it, and you will see more criminal justice reform, I think, coming out of the Congress in the next year or 2 years. So thank you for that.
Okay. Our next person will be 052.
That's the mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
That was not set up, folks, I promise you. Only Dr. McNair was set up.
Y'all know what, thank you for your support in the past. We were working on P100 at that time, and since we didn't get it,
Right.
we're still working to try to expand the airport, the runway to 6,500 feet, which would allow us to work with the university in terms of aviation program.
Right.
Being funded with the Red Tails Foundation. We just try to like to see if you can help us with that. We have contacted Senator Shelby's office. He promised in the past about it. We're going to follow up on that so we can move on that because we're developing a flight aviation program.
Right.
We have some major people who are getting involved with us to help fund the Red Tails Foundation training program. And we really need to expand that airport.
Absolutely.
To 500.
We'll work on that. I know that there was a number of things that came up in the last budget that grants for other airports this year around Alabama have been done. So we'll make sure, and we've got staff here all over the place that we can talk to make sure that that's on the top of our list. Because I understand how important it is. We actually had a discussion with the folks out at Maxwell about the Red Tail Foundation and some other things as well. So, you know, I know they not at Maxwell but at Danley, and so we'll do what we can to help support whatever you can and help find the money if we can find it. Okay? Yep.
We have 090. 090.
All right, call another one.
050.
All right. Before you ask this question, why don't you call one more number in case and somebody can get ready? Yeah, you can, sure. You can stand here if you want to.
My name is Benjamin Rackley, and when we stood for the pledge, I saw you being first. Put your hand over your heart.
Yeah.
And as a veteran of Vietnam, living in this community, I have great concern about where we are with the VA hospital.
Sure.
And you know, we're without a director, deputy director's gone, chief of nursing, the whole staff at the top's gone.
Right.
It gives me pain to realize that we may get a whole new staff of people, or we may not.
Now, you're going to get a new staff.
My concern is, currently, we only have positions at 25% level in primary care.
Mm-hmm.
They're leaving because are you committed to ensuring, one, that this VA remains open and viable,
Yes.
and two, that it is
Yes.
for veterans and hopefully others who partner with the agency?
Right. Absolutely. I could stop and just say yes, yes, yes. Okay, because I am absolutely committed. We just brought up somebody on board on the staff in Washington who is going to be dedicated solely to veterans issues because it's become such an important issue. Let me tell you about how some of these changes took place here in Tuskegee, because we are going to have that staff. Now, the level of the primary care physicians is a problem here, but it's a problem across the country as well. But just when I got to the Senate last year, there was a lot of public information that came out that was not very flattering to the VA here as well as Montgomery. And it just so happened that the president had just nominated Secretary Wilkie to be the VA administrator. And he came to visit. He didn't have to because I was not on the Veterans Committee, but he came to see me in part because Alabama, Tuskegee, Tuscaloosa, we'd gotten some publicity, and we immediately pushed a bill through with Senator Cassidy for more transparency and requirement of transparency for nursing home issues and the things that are going on there. That got passed pretty quickly. But when Mr. Wilkie came and we talked, and I really like him, he talked about trying to up the better health care, to implement what is called the Mission Act, to try to get health care for veterans across the states in rural areas so they don't have to drive as much. But I made a point of talking to him and showed him the articles about the VA issues that had come up here and in Montgomery. And we talked about those. I told him, I said, I'm just reading the reports. I haven't been down there, so I don't know, but I want you to look into it, please. And he said he would. Now, and to his credit, he did. He called me the day before the announcements were made about the retirements and the change. He said, Senator, and he didn't have to do this. He didn't need my vote to get confirmed. He was confirmed pretty strong. But he followed through with a commitment from a junior senator from Alabama who hadn't even been in there for 3-4 months. And he personally came down here. He had a team that came down. He personally came down and he saw the problems. So he is committed to replacing the team. That's going to happen. He is going to replace the team. This is not going to go away. This is not a first step of getting rid of the VA in this area. It is the first step of making sure we get the quality of care where it needs to be. So, and I can assure you that if I don't see him replacing that team pretty soon, I'm going to call him back and say, Bob, where are you, buddy? We need you. Now, the other thing that we want to do, and we were literally just talking about this with Dr. McNair and Ron Sparks. Where's Ron? Ron's standing over the corner. Many of you know Ron's on my Senate staff. Ron was Commissioner of Agriculture, ran for governor here in 2010, and he knows a lot of the VA issues. So we're going to talk about whether or not we can figure out a way, and I can't make a promise of this, but we'll see if we can figure out a way to get the VA to get some emergency room services, some urgent care services that can also help the community here. We'll see if there's ways to do that. I can't promise. Y'all don't clap too early, okay? You know, but we're going to try. Yeah. Yes, we can. I got it. Yes, we can. I'll buy that. All right. Thank you, sir. Thanks for those.
Okay, so I'm going to call out 3 numbers, and so if you're one of these 3, just head to the mic. I have 099, so 99, 089, and 100.
Did she call your number a minute ago? Not yet, but you got a ticket. All right, just hold tight.
Okay.
Anybody with any of those 3 numbers?
99, 100, 89.
All right, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pretend that you've got one of those numbers. Okay? You go ahead and ask your question. I'm going to just pretend you got one.
Thank you, Senator. I am one of your supporters, so it's in order.
Okay, that's it.
I didn't send my last contribution for the...
We'll send them early and often.
I intend to. But really, I know that the Democratic Party in the state of Alabama has a history of dissent. I served in the late 80s. And I am most appreciative of everything that you have done for a lifetime, that you are currently doing, and that you will do for us. Do want to ensure, and I know that you want to be there, that you continue to be our senator.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
However, my question is, are you going to participate in the Democratic National Committee meeting on Saturday? I note that you were there on last Saturday, and it is really time that we have unity. When I was there, as I said, we had dissent, but we always came together under the umbrella of the, quote,
right,
official chairman and meeting. So I think, especially with those of us who walked the streets and did everything else, who were primarily African Americans, females, and of course our Caucasians, we have that opportunity to turn this state into a blue state. And I am...
But how do you do that?
Let me just say this.
I mean, we've turned to a deep red state
Yes.
with the current leadership
Yes.
of the Democratic Party. So I'm here to listen to you. How do we do that?
Well, I'm going to say some things
Okay.
because you asked.
Please.
Didn't intend to take so much time.
That's okay.
Okay, but one thing is to attend the meeting on Saturday.
Okay.
The other thing, and I have said to our vice president and to this young man who attends my church, is that if we get students from Tuskegee, which we know we are going to do, I'm going to help them to register and vote. Students from Alabama State, students from Alabama A&M, in fact, all the schools, Talladega, Stillman, all of those students to register and vote. They think they don't need to vote in Alabama, that they are going to vote at home. But we have found that does not work.
Right.
And of course, those of us who are here. The other thing, a satellite office in Tuskegee. We are known as the pride of the swift-growing South. And what we do usually impacts other folks. And they lead us, they follow us. So a satellite unit. And that's why I held my little money, because I may need to hold it to help in an office here in Tuskegee. Those are just some of the things
All right,
that I think.
let me ask you a quick question, though,
Yes.
and then I'll address every one of those.
Yes.
First of all, I didn't go to the meeting Saturday because my mom got released from the hospital and I had to take care of her, so I didn't go. Wait a minute, hang on a minute.
Okay.
But my question to you is, I'm going to try to go. I've got an ADC meeting that I'm speaking to in Tuscaloosa, but I'm going to try to go. But why is it important that I go to this meeting on Saturday when I had a whole bunch of people boycotting a legitimately called meeting? Under the bylaws of the Alabama Democratic Party, if half the members of the party, the state executive committee, call for a meeting, you have a meeting. And I got the documents to show over half of the people called for it, but I had a whole swath of folks who said, we ain't going, we ain't recognizing it. Well, why? I'm going, because I think any party meeting I need to go to. But the fact of the matter is, we had a whole group of folks who said, I ain't going to this meeting. I ain't going to the meeting last time, and we passed new bylaws that are in effect today.
Let me answer that
Yeah.
part. And I'm so glad you were honest, because the Montgomery Advertiser that I read, and I saw something on television, I suspect many of you in this room saw the same thing. It said you were part of the organizing.
I know I helped organize
You
it. There's no
organized.
question I helped
Okay,
organize it.
okay.
I mean, I clearly helped organize it. I just couldn't go. But I clearly helped organize it, and it was a legitimately called meeting. That's the issue that I'm trying to find out from folks. Why didn't everybody go to that? And were people around here urging folks to go to that meeting when other people were saying don't go?
I think I answered that in the beginning by saying that, quote, those elected people are the ones to call, but I do understand that folks
ma'am.
have the right to call
The chair
number
can
one.
call a meeting, but so can 50%.
Let's not debate that.
Okay.
My question, my statement.
But you
is-
understand, well, hang on a minute, you understand my frustration when I'm being asked to go to a meeting this week, but at the same time, there was a meeting Saturday, and the chairman and the vice chair from Minority Affairs said, don't go. Don't go, boycott it. And now all of the folks that we help organize, we're trying to get them to go. We want to make sure that this is a meeting that they need to go to. But I think I think it's unfair to characterize it the way you're characterizing it about this meeting as being the most important meeting when that meeting was pretty dang important.
I didn't say it was the most important. I asked that you would attend this one. Now that you are saying you're unable to go, do the same thing that you did
I'm gonna
for the
go.
other one, and that's equality.
Okay.
Okay.
But let me
That's
just
fair.
talk about the party, and I appreciate your thing.
Okay.
But because you got to remember now that the party is operating under new bylaws that got passed Saturday. There's a whole new set of bylaws, and the party is supposed to be reaching out to youth and affirmative action. This meeting is going to take place, but quite candidly, I don't think they can do anything. I don't think they can pass new bylaws. I don't think they can fill vacancies. This party got into trouble last year because they were doing things that were not consistent with the National Democratic Party and their outreach and affirmative action to both youth, Hispanic, LGBTQ, and other minority populations. And so the thing that got passed, and a lot of people don't realize this, but what got passed was a new set of bylaws that's going to bring in youth, going to bring in the other issues without at all diluting the voting strength of the African American population. in the party.
DeHart
So
did too.
that's the issue. So I don't know. I'm going to try to be there. I got to come from Tuscaloosa. I'm going to try to be there, and I'm encouraging everybody to go. I'm encouraging everybody to go. I'm just not so sure they can conduct any real business on Saturday because they're not complying with the bylaws that got passed this past Saturday. You've got a whole new set of bylaws and a whole new set of rules, and I don't think they can do anything until they bring in youth and others as according to the bylaws that are in effect now.
All right, thank you,
I'll
ma'am.
end my debate, but I'll talk to you.
Okay.
One-on-one.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm going to do 3 more numbers, and then this is going to be like the final 3. We have 064, 0. Yes, ma'am. 064.
We have a 064, they left, okay? Again, Senator, thank you so much for coming, and I truly understand your issues because we have the same issue in Alabama in our state house that's super majority
Right.
Republican.
Yeah.
And we have to find our places and we have to work the way that we can work in those situations. I applaud you for that. But I'm concerned about, you know, Alabama, we've talked about expanding Medicaid over and over, and for some reason, my colleagues on the Republican side are now seeing that there is a need that we try to do something. And we told them we don't care, you could, it's only that Obama connection in Alabama that's holding us back, okay?
Yep.
That's the only thing that's holding us back. So we told them we can call it Hbcus, K-Care, anything they want to call it, but just let's get
That's
it
right.
going. My question to you, I think you and Representative Sewell did a bill
Yeah.
that will accommodate the latecomers into the program.
We'll give you a second bite of the apple. Yes.
That is, we're good at that. That's
Well, no, it hasn't passed yet. Now, what you're talking about is called the SAME Act. It's called the States Achieving Medicare Expansion. And Congresswoman Sewell and Congressman Lewis over in the House have got a bill that's pretty identical with the one that Senator Warner and I have that would give states, you know, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, for states that expanded Medicaid, you'd have 3 years of 100% reimbursement. It wouldn't cost the state anything.
Right.
Then it would step up to the 95 federal, 5% state, then 90-10 over a period of time. So our bill would give the 14 states that have not expanded Medicaid the opportunity to get in and get a second bite of the apple and get that 3 years. So it's not passed yet. It hasn't been brought to the floor of the House, and I don't know if we can ever get it on the floor of the Senate. I've been telling people around Alabama, the state hospital association and the interest groups that really believe that this is big, the county commissioners and the mayors that need Medicaid expanded, to talk to their counterparts in some of these other states that haven't expanded Medicaid, try to get their senators to join our bill, to try to see if we can get it bubbled up to the floor. Senator McConnell doesn't put much on the floor unless it's a nomination these days. But if we can get that done, and I think, look, we got to take little steps. The fact that you guys, that the other side was even talking about it this year, that's pretty good victory.
It's getting to be quite interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think what they did, for so often, you know, they looked at Medicaid as being a minority problem.
Poor and black.
And when
Absolutely.
it came out, when they gave us the figures, we have 46% of African Americans on Medicaid. Okay?
Right.
We got 42% of whites.
Right.
I told them I don't want to hear the percentages. I want to get the head counts.
Yeah,
And
that's
when
exactly
they did the head counts, they saw that the majority superseded what we
Absolutely.
had on Medicaid, okay? So now they are in a point, because the people in the trailers, they getting a little frustrated now too.
You betcha.
Okay? They've been fooled for a long time.
Absolutely.
So anything that we can do to try to help support to get that bill, I'm pretty sure it will make it much easier for us in Alabama as we start negotiating and trying to show ways that we've lost billions of dollars.
Well, I think all the folks that are interested in Medicaid expansion can look at the other states that haven't expanded and call folks over there to say, look at, have your senators, and it's mainly deep South states. There's a couple outliers, but it's all the states that need it the most. Call call your senators, get them to join the Jones-Warner bill called the SAME Act. and see if you can get Mitch McConnell to do it. If we can get that, because if it ever gets to the House, it'll pass the House of Representatives. We can get that done over there. It's the Senate where we're going to have a problem. And we'll have to get 60 votes in the Senate to pass it. But I think we could do that. I think we can get it if I can get the Republicans, it's primarily the 14 other states are Republican senators.
Okay.
And we need to get them engaged. Even if they don't like expanding Medicaid, at least give their states the chance.
Gotcha.
You know?
Okay, one more question. 'cause I
Yes,
want to-
ma'am.
Okay, we have a problem in our black communities as it relates to environmental management. If you look at the map of the state of Alabama, every dump that we have in this state is in black communities.
Right.
We got to find some ways of dealing with that because the water, I mean, you just look at this little community.
Yeah.
We got folks cancer, diabetes, I mean, diseases are running rapid.
Right.
Because nobody is really looking at what we're bringing in from nature and the natural things. So we got to find a way, and I know the Black Caucus, we're going to really start working on
Good.
the environmental issues that we have in our districts, and we need all the help and the support that we can get from
I think
Washington.
environmental justice is something that has gone unattended for a long, long time. And I applaud you for doing that. We're trying to look at some issues. We have gone, you know, one of the first things I did, I didn't really fully realize it, all that was going on. One of the first things I did after I got in the Senate was take a tour of some of the Black Belt counties that have such really
Raw
bad
sewage running
raw
behind
sewer.
schools. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Into creeks,
Third
into
world
the
country,
things.
we're living here in Alabama.
And so last year we were able to get, and they're just now getting to a point where the money's available, but with Senator Booker and Senator Capito, female from Republican from West Virginia, and Congresswoman Sewell working in the House, we were able to get several $1 million worth of grant monies for folks for individual septic tanks as well as larger sewers. We've got another bill pending that we're hoping to pull into the appropriations process this year for like standalone grant monies for all of those issues. So but I agree with you. It's a real problem. It's a real problem throughout the state of where both landfills have been put and where things have gone neglected from years past. They've just gone neglected. And I'll help however I can. I will say this. I wouldn't expect a lot of help from the EPA these days. They don't seem to be doing much anything for anybody.
Here in Alabama, I mean,
Well, ADM's never done much.
ADM is just
Right. Yeah.
And if you look, if you go anybody here, if you just ride Highway 49 going up to Hbcus County, you see on the average within an hour of 10 trucks that's dumping dump in right across the Macon County line from Illinois.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'll help however I can. Let's try to get a better EPA in a couple of years. Okay? Yes, ma'am?
Hello, Senator Jones. So my question is pursuant to the fact that you mentioned that you sit on the banking committee, and I don't know if you're aware of the upcoming bill in the House. I think starting next week, there's an SEC bill that discusses investor screening. And my question, are you aware of
I'm
that
not
bill?
familiar with that particular bill.
Well, the bill, from what I researched, was sponsored by Senator Caston, and I'm asking about it because I am a I'm a finance major here in the School of Business, and essentially my question is asking, well, the bill itself is really to screen investors as far as the kind of disclosure that is required by the SEC in order to choose their investors.
Right.
And I don't know if you're also aware, but today is October 8th, correct? The Supreme Court is discussing basically about companies discriminating against the LGBT
Yeah, I'm
community.
familiar with that, for
Yes, but on the employment end, as far as these companies making it constitutional, essentially, to discriminate against people based on gender identity, and really just of course the investors drive these companies, but so coming down from like a trickle-down effect. What do you think about? What is your position essentially on investor screening? Like, do you think that as far as pursuing legislation on it would make it a more transparent, I guess, environment? Because for me, I've been doing a lot of studying in these areas, and corporate governance is really an oxymoron. So I think
Let me make sure I understand your question.
Yes.
because I'm not familiar with the particular bill, but I think your question goes to shareholders in a company that are demanding that their company that they own the shares in be more socially responsible. Is that what you're talking about?
In a sense, because when there is a lack of adequate understanding of the transparency that is required by disclosure, then therefore those investors, they choose those investors and they partake in unethical practices that ultimately impact like basically the economy in a sense. So I was asking as far as investor screening, well, but I think the problem is that you're not familiar with the bill. So, I'm
not familiar with the bill. I'm not familiar with the process of investor screening as opposed to, I'll look into it.
Yeah, it's really intuitive. It's just like in screening your investors, really just having a more...
But public companies don't really do that. I mean, private companies do, but a public company doesn't really screen your investors. You can go on the
Well, it's a bill that's going to be voted on the House next week.
What will it do?
Well, essentially, it would just make for a clearer understanding of what companies are required to disclose to investors as far as from the SEC standpoint, right? Okay. So I'm asking just essentially, what is your position on investor screening? Because that is something that impacts the economy.
All right. I'm not familiar with investor screening. What I am familiar with is as much transparency and disclosure. The SEC for public companies already requires an incredible amount of disclosure to the public before they offer their stock to the public. There's an awful lot, and I don't know if there's efforts to change that or to they do a lot.
See, it's not the lack thereof of disclosure, it's what is being required to be disclosed. Yes, they disclose a lot, but it's not material to infractions based off of the unethical practices of a lot of businesses. And that's why I brought up what the Supreme Court will be discussing, because we have these corporations that have unconstitutional practices.
I'll look at that because I'm not familiar with that. I do know this as a lawyer. Mm-hmm. I can tell you as a lawyer who's handled these cases, that unethical practices are by themselves material. And if they're unethical practice, they ain't going to disclose them. I mean, they're just not going to do it. But you got lawyers out there, because I handled a bunch of those. When those unethical practices come to light and they affect that company, there are already remedies for shareholders and all to sue the companies, to get their insurance companies and all to pay some dividends. But I will look at, because I'm not completely familiar with what you're talking about. And if it's coming up, and you've mentioned Senator Hassan.
Caston, I believe, C-A-S-T-N.
All right, Representative Caston. Yes. Okay, I'll look and see what that is, because I know there's a lot out there already. I will tell you that I'm very, as I said a minute ago, the disclosure requirements are only as good as the honesty of the corporations. And if they're not going to be very honest, we got to have the other mechanisms in place to be able to ferret that out, whether it's the SEC or private lawyers and investors themselves, to go after them and to make sure they either go to prison or they go or they pay to the investors who.
Which is essentially what this bill will be pursuing. So I guess the way that you're characterizing it, you would be kind of supportive too.
Well, I think it's already exists, but I'll certainly look. I mean, those remedies exist under the Securities Act of 19.
Well, sitting on the banking committee, I would hope to do so.
Sure. I'll be happy to look at it.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to close it out this town.
Oh, wait a minute. Hang on a minute. I'm not going to get out of this town hall without my friend Willie Kirk being able to ask a question. Or make a speech, one of the two. Willie, you're getting shouted down on the speech, but go ahead, Willie.
I just want to thank you and Howard Heflin for all the hard work you've done when you worked that man up there in Washington. And I want to thank you for the job you're doing now. It is a plus to you to have Ron Sparks working for you.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely.
Is it true that the president moved the money out of Homeland Security to build that wall?
Not out of Homeland Security. He moved it to Homeland Security. He moved it out of the Defense Department where there were construction funds that Congress had appropriated, and he moved them out of the defense that we had appropriated money for construction problems, and he moved it to Homeland Security to help build the wall. That's what happened, and the Supreme Court upheld that.
Well, my question is, I reckon everybody knows that I'm the unofficial mayor of Little Texas. We need a storm shelter out there in Little Texas Fire Department.
Right.
And I want to ask you and Ron and them to see if y'all can help us with a grant to get that done.
We'll look at that. We've got a bill pending now that we did after the Lee County tornadoes that would try to give some tax credits and some other grants to try to get some storm shelters built in these rural areas. So we'll look at that. That bill hadn't passed yet, but we've got it pending that we'll look. It's a problem.
Well, I want to tell you that Irene is getting prepared for your election.
That's the best news I've heard all day.
You got a new set of false teeth for the new mayor.
Thank you, Willie. Let me close out, okay? All right. Yeah. Okay.
Senator, I just want to rise to my fellow colleague, Mr. Johnson. So I'm wearing a couple of hats up here at the university every day. I work college of agriculture here at the University of Tuskegee. Of course, Chair, my colleague, President Baker County. I just want to rise and thank you for all that you have done already for the community. There's regionalism going on in the Salsa Beach and Bullitt County, so people have come out to here and be here. They're witness to what's going on here today. So I just want to rise and thank you. We appreciate all the concerns that the district across the board for here. The students and the education that takes place as well. We recognize that as a great gift that you bestowed on these young people here today. Thank you for that, and we look forward to you providing some answers to some of the questions that have been raised here.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you both. Let me say as we close out here, how much, again, thank you, Dr. McNair, and thank you, Tuskegee, for being here. Thank you to the students that were here, but thank you all for coming, sharing your thoughts, your questions. It's always important. I take this back. When I say I work for you, I really mean it. I'm not going to do everything you agree with every time, which is true of my wife. She doesn't agree with most of what I do. But I'm doing what we can, and every day I am so honored to be in the position. Willie referred a minute ago to my old boss, Senator Howell Heflin. I am in his spot. I started, for those of you who are students here, I started right out of law school 1 year in Washington, D.C. working for Judge Heflin. It's been an amazing experience, and for me to now be in his seat in Washington, D.C., to walk on the floor of that Senate every day, to represent you, to walk into my office every day is one of the greatest honors that anybody could ever have bestowed on them. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for letting me be your senator. Frankly, I hope I'll be around for a while. So thank you all so much. Thank you.